Mr Chair.
I call Dennis O'Rourke.
Mr Chairman, New Zealand First does not oppose the intent of Part 3 of this bill relating to surveillance powers and declaratory orders. But New Zealand First certainly does have some reservations about the manner in which those powers will be used, and those have been referred to already by some of the previous speakers. As some previous speakers have already said, there does need to be a balance between enforcement, especially using modern techniques, and bearing in mind some of the crime which today the community is facing, on the one hand, but also the right to privacy on the other. And that is a very difficult balance to reach and requires very careful consideration. In particular, this is necessary where trespass surveillance is to be authorised. And of course, the bill takes some trouble to address that. However, I note that only offences punishable by a period of imprisonment of 7 years or more will be subject to those provisions. So on balance, a New Zealand First position would be that, subject to some of the reservations which have been expressed and which I express here as to the methodology by which these powers are to be enforced, New Zealand First would say that in respect of this part of the bill, the balance has probably been correctly arrived at. So we would not, for that reason, oppose that part of the bill. We note also that the bill now provides some protection for the freedom of the press, especially by confirming the privilege to protect sources contained in section 130. But I would have to ask, does that really in practice provide a significant protection? It's all very well for section 130 to simply state that that privilege exists. However, the reality is that if a search was conducted of a news media organisation and information about the sources of information were uncovered, there would have to be a period of time within which the news media organisation could challenge that search and the use of that information. And I'm not satisfied that in practice, therefore, the bill actually does protect the freedom of the press in respect of their need to protect their sources. And I would like to have seen the bill go somewhat further than it does. So I would have to agree with some of the previous speakers when they say that the bill goes too far in some of the methods it authorises and some of the agencies that it authorises to enforce some and to have some of these powers. However much New Zealand First supports the need for effective enforcement, we cannot oppose the bill. We cannot agree with the bill overall, simply because, as I've said in a previous speech, it includes a very serious issue, which is examination orders and production orders, which seriously breach the ancient right of silence. And that is not something which New Zealand First could agree with. That has compromised the whole bill, and as a result, New Zealand First is unable to support it overall. You see, it's not just a matter of balance when it comes to the protection of very important democratic rights, such as the right to silence. No form of balance, no consideration of balance is relevant to that. It's quite simple. Rights of that magnitude must be protected. People have fought wars to protect rights of that kind and our democracy as a whole. And there is no way that this should be chipped away at in the form it is in this bill and similar sorts of legislation. I would remind the House that in sections 31 and 32, a senior police officer is given the right for an examination order.
That's part 2. We're on part 3.
I'm just moving on to that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just stay on part 3. That's what we're debating. Part 3.
Well, part 3 cannot be agreed to simply because the bill as a whole cannot be agreed to. And I would have to repeat that in a non-business context, where those rights.
The Honourable David Parker.
Chairman, the first issue I would like some clarification from the Minister and the Chair relates